Everyone, this is Tim Olmsted. He is one of the senior instructors of Turgar. He's a longtime student of Mingyur Rinpoche, and he was also a student of Mingyur Rinpoche's father, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. He's spent a considerable amount of time in Nepal. He's also um, been in charge of the Pema Chodron Foundation, so he is familiar with Pema and her work. He has in his regular career, he was a psychotherapist for a time, and he has a great breadth of experience and a wonderful style and way of presenting teachings that I think we will all really enjoy. And so this is the first time that Tim has been with the Chicago community, even though he went to the University of Chicago. And he has spent time here. So we're delighted to have him. And this is just a rare opportunity, and it's something that the Zoom portal has provided for us. So how nice. So anyway, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to your teachings.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Madeline. And good morning, everybody. Yeah, this is the first time I've ever been with a Chicago group. I've heard about you for many years. And, you know, like Amy said, I went to graduate school at the University of Chicago, and I have really fond memories for it. So I'm not even sure that I've been back, and it's been a very, very long time, but maybe things are better in memory than than in the middle of winter in Chicago. So I'll keep it like that. So before we, formally launch, let's just take a moment to bring to mind the hope, the aspiration that that there's something that comes out of today that is helpful to us, and by extension helpful to others. As I was saying to Madeline and Amy earlier, the only thing that I'm interested in coming out of today is that in some way, shape, or form, what we do today sort of moves the needle for you, that there's something that you hear, an image, a quote, a line of logic, something, a metaphor, something that actually gets into your system and works on you. The beauty of, in this case, the teachings of the Buddha, or the teachings of our path that we share, or the teachings of anything that is true, is that you don't need to get the whole thing. Today, you don't need, it's clear to me that you'll forget, hopefully, 90% of what I say, but there'll be something that will get inside. It's kind of like a sugar cookie, that if we have a big sugar cookie and if I drop it on the table and it breaks into 1,000 crumbs and you eat one of the crumbs, you have eaten the sugar cookie. You know what it's like. You know what it tastes like. You know the truth of that. So it's the same here, that the internal sort of integrity of our path and the study that goes with it is such that any piece of it that you get, if you nurture that little piece, whatever it might be, you will get the whole thing. That's just the way it is. There's a beautiful line in a sutra called the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Jewels, and it's a line that you may have heard. It says, the Dharma, or the teachings, is good in the middle. Sorry, it's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end. So wherever we are, it's good. It has the potential to fully awaken us, no matter what piece of what we're talking about. For instance, you could say that in the Joy of Living series, for instance, any one piece in there contains the entirety of what we need to know in this life. So all that is to say, you don't need to take notes. You don't need to remember anything. If you don't remember anything, it's fine with me. I'm not insulted. But if we actually do it right this morning, something shifts. So that's my aspiration for the day. And my request for everybody is this Zoom platform stuff is really great for 100 reasons. But the downside is that it's harder to create a kind of interchange, a sort of ongoing dialogue. And so that's my favorite thing, is to have a sort of ongoing dialogue with you. So for better, for worse, I don't like to lecture anymore, and we need to try. My request to you is, I beg you, please. One is, forgive me if I ask you a lot of questions, and the other is, if there's anything that we say today that is either that you don't understand, that's contrary to something you've heard elsewhere, or if you want me to go further with it, or you want to ask a question related to your own personal experience with that thing, just break in. I really just literally break in. It's much more fun for me to do it that way, because the only thing that I'm interested in, like I said, is that something shifts. And if I just go off, on what I'm interested in, and you just sort of watch me, that's not going to happen. But if there's some sort of, like, if you have skin in the game, in other words, your question, your issue, whatever, your ponderance that you want to present, this is by far the best. Amy said that I studied with Mingyur Rinpoche's father. I moved to Nepal almost immediately after I met Mingyur Rinpoche's father in Boulder, Colorado. He was that compelling. And I went for a year. I stayed for 12 years. And he never really taught. He never taught like this. Very seldom, maybe once a year, he would teach to a group of people. So 95% of the time, it was simply being in front of him and you coming with your question. He would just wait for you until you came out. I always carried a legal pad of questions, because to go see him was a big trip. And he was very kind. He'd just wait for me to pull out the legal pad, and he'd sort of look at me bemused. So that everything was based on questions. And the beauty of that is, when you have a question and you tee up a question, you're in the game. You have skin in the game. So that whatever he would say related to something that I was already churning. So actually, I don't remember very many things, but I remember almost everything he said because of that dynamic. So that's just a little setup for today.
And
So
and in that vein, Tim, again, that's part of the reason why we wanted to have this sort of small, intimate gathering where we could all be on the screen together, so that we can just kind of raise our hand and we can sort of feel like we're in the room together as best we can. So again, this is such a wonderful opportunity for us to,
yeah,
Tim has so much experience and such a wealth of knowledge that we really could ask him anything to help us
yeah,
with the
great.
practice. Sincerely, that's what he wants. So let's do it.
Yeah. So I see 1, 2, 3. I think I see all of you. So raise your hand or just jump in. It's perfectly fine. So how do you normally start your gatherings? Do you say the lines of aspiration or not, or is it more formal?
Yeah, we normally start it off and just do body space awareness, and then the aspiration is baked in there, and that's what we do.
So Amy, why don't you just lead us in whatever you do for
All
a few
right.
minutes? Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, why don't we just settle in and get comfortable. Okay. Just drop into your body. Let go of whatever has been happening so far this morning. Not yet having to deal with whatever's coming next. Let's just see if we can bring our mind into the body and our body onto our seats. And let's remind ourselves of our motivation for being here today. Calming our minds and opening our hearts can bring peace and happiness not only to our own lives, but also to the lives of those around us and to all people. remembering that all sentient beings share the same desire to be happy and free from suffering. So it's with this motivation that we'll chant the opening aspiration together. With boundless compassion and wisdom, I will work for the welfare of all. May we be free from hunger and discord, and have joy in a world at peace. And so now, with your eyes gently closed, if that feels comfortable to you, let's bring our awareness to the body. Just notice the body breathing. As best you can, allow the body to be relaxed and at ease. Gently bring your attention to the top of your head and slowly begin to scan down your forehead and face. Bring your attention to your shoulders. You can allow your muscles to relax as much as they want to right now. And gradually move down through your torso, all the way down to your legs and feet. You may notice tension or gripping. Nothing at all. It's all allowed to be there. Just hold it in the gentle touch of awareness. You may notice your body settling or lots of thoughts and feelings. It's perfectly natural to get lost. When you realize you've been lost, that's awareness. So just come back to the body and we'll continue our meditation. Now let's expand our awareness further outside the body to our surroundings. attention to any sounds, smells, or sensations you're experiencing. Allowing your awareness to become more open, vast, spacious as you stay with each of these for just a few moments. Now we can expand our awareness even further, beyond our immediate surroundings. Allow yourself to become aware of the space around you in all directions, above you, below you, all directions, and just rest in the awareness of this space. And as Rinpoche says, don't worry, you won't get lost. Just rest as it is. Remember that all phenomena occur in space, change in space, and dissolve back into space. Now we can go beyond the clouds of phenomena and just rest in boundless space, just for a few moments. eyes if they've been closed, and just be present. You don't need to meditate. Just kind of bring our mind and body together for just a few minutes and just become aware of whatever is arising in the present moment. Okay, thanks everybody. Tim, you're muted, just so you know.
So what we're going to do this morning is what I want to do is sort of lay out the kind of the path that we share, the journey that we share, from the point of view of what we refer to as path logic. In other words, from how it unfolds as our own experience. Of course, as we all want to, we talk about working with beginning, we work with making a relationship with mind through meditation, and that, as we all know, begins to sort of unfold and to expand as a sort of a quality of then working with the principles of loving kindness and compassion. And this is wonderful, of course, but what I want to do today is really, this morning, is really get clear about how that happens as a lived experience, how that happens as an unfolding in our own personal experience, not as something that we should try to emulate or to walk that path because it's part of some program, but actually how everything arises as a spontaneous expression of what we discover on the cushion. So to sort of start at the beginning, as it were, the kind of beginning of the beginning, where we all are, is that we all imagine that there is a way of being that is more open, less constricted, more relaxed, more connected, more warmly connected to the world, more engaged, that we just have this sense that there is some way of being that I'm not experiencing now. In fact, the fact that we have this sensibility at all suggests that somewhere in our system, we know that that's a possibility. If we didn't know it's a possibility, we wouldn't long for it. If we didn't know it's a possibility, we wouldn't long for it and feel distress for having not had it. So this longing is in some ways sort of us calling out for ourselves because we intuit that we're lost, that something is off. This is in the Buddha's life story. This is exactly how his life story was discussed, that he lived in the palace, the proverbial palace, which is sort of a metaphor for the life we live right now, and realized actually something is off. Realizing that something is off and feeling it very, very, very pointedly. This is wisdom. This is our inherent wisdom. Wanting to be free of whatever distress that we're feeling. As you know, this is our inherent compassion. Longing for some way of being that gives us sort of meaning and kind of well-being. That's what we refer to technically, by definition, as loving kindness. So our suffering, at the beginning and all the way through, our distress, our dis-ease, is of the nature of wisdom, compassion, and loving kindness. That is the nature of it. So the reason I want to make this point is for us to understand that suffering is not a mistake. Suffering has tremendous intelligence to it. It also has the intelligence to get us to do something, to move. And you know what, Mingyur Rinpoche is clear about what suffering means here. Suffering means many things, right? It's just some basic distress of some kind: physical, emotional, psychological, social, political, environmental, financial, sexual, whatever, some sort of like distress. And it's unique to each of us. But this is our working ground. This is our rich, fertile ground, that when we know how to relate to this, the entire path comes out of it. From right out of the gate, from what we experience right at the beginning, if we know how to work with that, everything arises. All the wisdom, compassion, the skill, the insight, the understanding, everything arises from this. So this is our starting point. In fact, if someone had a pill, if our dear friend Richie Davidson invented a pill in the lab that he could give us and we would all be happy, it would be a catastrophe. Because there'd be no depth to it. There'd be no wisdom. There'd be no compassion that came out of it. There'd be nothing. I really encourage us to not try to set up our distress as some other, as some problem, the problem that has to be solved. Rather, to understand that in many ways it's the best of us inviting us. Even in the classic, Mingyur Rinpoche talks about basic goodness all the time, right? Everybody knows that. So these teachings came out of a text called not a text, but a teaching called the Uttara Tantra Shastra that is translated as Buddha nature. And even in that text, it says that our suffering is an expression of our Buddha nature. Because if we didn't know light, we would never know darkness. If we didn't know darkness, if we didn't know suffering, if we didn't know peace intuitively, then the experience of not having it wouldn't feel uncomfortable. It wouldn't feel like something else because we'd have nothing to compare it to. It's like my puppy will never be anxious about never going to first grade because there's nothing in the system. So all that is to say, where we find ourselves now, this morning, from time to time, at the beginning of our journey, whatever, however you want to understand it, this is pure gold. And then we're called to do something. We're called to figure this out. And in our tradition, the first thing we do is we sit down. We sit down to take stock. We sit down to understand what in the world is going on. To begin to make a relationship with this extraordinary instrument of creation, you could say. And make an intimate relationship with how we have created our world and how we respond to that world. So of course, we have techniques that you've all learned very, very well. Body sensation, follow the breath, sound, whatever, mantra, whatever it might be. But these are, as Mingyur Rinpoche says, we need to give monkey a good job. These are, in some ways, you could think these are just tricks that we use to allow ourselves to sit in one place long enough. For this quality of understanding, intimacy to begin to happen. This is what it means. This is what it means to become friends with oneself. We all talk about becoming friends with ourselves these days in Western Buddhism, which is beautiful. This is what it means to finally, it's so interesting. Everybody wants peace. We all want peace, and we all want peace, peace. But actually, it's the last thing we offer ourselves. Even when we sit down to meditate, which is some sort of gesture towards peace, we're just constantly manipulating our experience. It's not this, it's not that, yada, yada. There's just no end to it. Our demand that something happens that we think it should happen, we just take that right into we poison the medicine of our meditation by front loading it with all this stuff. It's like going out on a date, and all of a sudden, before you even sit down for the first course of dinner, imagining your wedding day. It kind of screws up the dinner. So when we sit down, the best practitioner, or the way to sit down, is to sit down with a quality of curious mind, and just to see what's going on here. What's in the same way that we would open the hood and listen to our engine, like why isn't it running? We sit down and we listen to ourselves, like, okay, what's going on here? So really the power, the beauty of meditation is this quality of making a relationship with what we could say is mind and mind's world, me and my world. This is everything. This basic gesture of sitting down and spending time with oneself, this is friendship. For once and for all, we can take a moment can we say? We can take a moment to be present with monkey, to give monkey mind his or her proper due, to respect him or her, to listen. This is what Amy was saying earlier, when this quality of just not judging, not rejecting. This is making a relationship. It's like going out to a cup of tea or a Coke or a Red Bull or whatever 15-year-olds do. 15-year-old boys are like marginally human. But if you go and you have whatever they drink with them every day for 6 months, just naturally over time, you get to know them. And naturally over time, that understanding develops deep friendship, even if they've never changed. Actually, the interesting thing about meditation is it's not the question of whether monkey changes, it's whether we change in relationship to monkey. Amy, I think you're a therapist. In my years as being a therapist, I can remember parents would come in with their kids or their child or whatever. The child was never the problem. It was whether the parents could have the proper quality of relationship with that emerging little monkey. Our monkeys are not the problem. It's our relationship to monkey. So I was saying to Madeline earlier that I can remember in many ways my entire path of learning, however successful or unsuccessful that's been, but it has been provoked by metaphors or simple images, stories, or quotes. So Madeline, you want to pull up this first quote, the value of a personal relationship? So I'll read this and then you can just read along. Actually, this is two quotes, it's not one, but the first one, the first couple of lines. The value of a personal relationship to things is that it creates intimacy, and intimacy creates understanding, and understanding creates love. Okay, I want to take it down. So this is the famous poet, Anais Nin. So in my mind, this is the kind of what we say in Vajrayana Buddhism, the seed syllable for this whole this whole path, is when we develop a personal relationship. That relationship, from that, what happens is we develop, so personal relationship is the process of meditating. Then on the basis of that, we develop a deeply intuitive, sensitive understanding of our hopes, of our fears, of our dreams, of our disasters. Everything arises from this. We realize what we're afraid of, what we aspire to, that we don't want to be left behind. We want to be understood. We want to be listened to. We want to be respected. We want to have a good life. We want to have friends. All of the things, all of these pieces, this is who we are. And we give ourselves time in the proper way of sitting down and being with ourselves with a curious and open attitude. This is what comes, is this deeply intuitive experience of who we are. In many ways, as you know, actually that experience can be, in the beginning, can be a little excruciating. This is good news, because for once and for all, we're actually listening to ourselves. In so many ways, meditation is like creating a kind of, it's what Amy, in the meditation you already did this morning, creating this environment where you can allow what is to be, to create a kind of holding environment in which we can actually be present to ourselves. This is kindness. Creating an environment where we're able to be heard, if only by ourselves. This is kindness. This is beautiful. This is everything. So I beg you to when we sit down, everybody says this, all the great teachers say this, to not manipulate our experience, to allow it to be what is, and everybody goes, okay, I got that, yeah. But I'm telling you, 40 years down the road, you'll sit down and you'll go, okay, today, monkey for once is going to shut up. I know monkey is going to monkey is going to become profound wisdom and compassion, or yada, yada, yada. There's no end to it. So please, when we sit down, simply follow the technique in a very matter-of-fact, workaday manner. In fact, there's a word for it in Tibetan. It's called pakyang. And pakyang basically means naive, in a naive way, a simple way, a carefree way. Just follow the technique. And this creates that environment that the rest comes out spontaneously, naturally. I can remember like it was yesterday. I can't remember yesterday, but I can remember this like it was yesterday. Going to Mingyur Rinpoche's father. Going to his father was a setup for remembering things, because it was a big production to even get to him. And the whole thing was so sort of weird and exotic. So finally, after traveling up into the hills to see him, and you'd go into his little retreat room, which was about 7 feet by 12 feet, something like that. So everything was intimate because you were like right there. You could literally not get far enough away from him so that he couldn't, reach out and touch you. And I can remember saying to him, oh, Rinpoche, my meditation is like this, and it's like that, and it's not this, and it's not that, and I can't do this, and I can't do this. And he stopped me very suddenly, which was was a bit of a shock, because he was a very gentle person. He didn't do anything suddenly. And he said, don't think like that. He said, just taking 7 steps towards your cushion with the aspiration to tame your mind, to benefit yourself and others. He said, that makes this life meaningful. And then get on the cushion, do whatever you do, and then get up and leave it. In fact, he said the most enigmatic thing. Then he said, if you've had a good meditation or if you've had a bad meditation, you haven't had meditation. So he's really inviting us. What his instruction was is just to do the technique and the rest will come. We don't need to judge it. We don't need to second guess it. We don't need to look back at it. We don't need to predict it. Just do it. Intimacy creates understanding, and understanding creates love. So within this environment, just naturally, of intimacy and love, of becoming friends with oneself, we finally, we begin to loosen up because we found a good friend, ourselves. We loosen up, we relax. This is just spontaneous. It's not something we try to do. When we're like not trying to sort of control our inner world, when that opens up, then we literally relax. We loosen, we soften, we look out, and the most amazing thing happens. And for me, this is this may be the most interesting piece of the entire journey, which is that we soften, we look out, we look at the world, and we see other people, and we just naturally, without having been told, we naturally intuit or come to this conclusion that is so obvious but has been eluding us all this time, which is, if what's true for me is probably true for others. That just like me, others are tormented by their lack of relationship with their own inner experience. This is amazing. It's like when we finally get sort of like understand monkey here, we understand all monkeys. We understand monkey business. And this quality of understanding actually opens us up further. We realize that we walk in a world of people that we deeply understand because we deeply understand ourselves. At this point, we begin to, how can you say, we begin to sort of understand and engage our collective desire to be happy and to avoid suffering. This, you could say, is our kind of essential kinship with the world, with everybody who's got monkey. So I can remember one time when I was coming up along the path. This was a while ago. It must have been like 1983 or 4 or something. Trungpa Rinpoche, the great Trungpa Rinpoche, was nearly my next door neighbor. And I was tormented by these questions because not having a wholesome relationship with myself was creating all sorts of grief for me. And I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out this compassion thing. I couldn't figure out anything, and I was desperate. So I went to him and I said, okay, Rinpoche, to Trungpa Rinpoche. Trungpa Rinpoche now is at the very end of his life. He's the sort of preeminent scholar yogi in our tradition, scholar monk in our tradition. And I said, Rinpoche, I said, okay, like one more time, what is this compassion thing? And he looked at me in the sweetest way and he said, Tim, if you are sitting at your desk and there's papers all over your desk and someone came into your office and they threw over the table and your papers went flying, what would you do? And I'd say, well, of course I'd be really pissed off. And he said, of course you would. He said, if you were sitting at your desk with papers and everything, and a good friend of yours came in, and you could see that friend of yours was legless drunk, and he fell against the table and the table went flying and the papers went flying, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd get up and see if my friend was okay. And he said, of course you would. He said, Tim, everybody is drunk on their afflictive emotions. And I said, okay, boss, I got it. That's enough. That's it. Right? This is how it is for all of us. Everybody wants so badly to be happy, and we screw it up completely. That's the poignancy of our condition, of the human condition. At the very heart of things, we're replete with wisdom and love and compassion, as we said. We all want the same thing. It's completely beautiful for us to want to be happy, to have a good life, to be free of our grief. That's completely human. It's so human. It's so beautiful. And we completely screw it up. There's a famous line. You want to bring that quote up again, Madeline? This one from Shantideva. Shantideva, the great Shantideva, wrote this beautiful work that all of you have heard about called The Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or The Way of the Bodhisattva. When the Dalai Lama won his Nobel Peace Prize, when he went on stage to receive the prize, he took this text called The Way of the Bodhisattva, and he said, everything I learned from this text. So would someone read this aloud?
I will. It says, for beings long to be free themselves from misery, but misery itself they race to catch. They long for joy, but in their ignorance destroy it as they would a hated enemy.
Yeah. This is how it is with us, right? We want to be happy, 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 and we screw it up constantly. We fight with our loved ones because we want to be happy. It's completely heartbreaking. So what we need to do, in some languaging of the Buddhist tradition, of the teachings in our tradition, and in languaging of other theistic traditions, Christianity or whatever, somehow we get the feeling, or it's actually stated in a lot of ways, that the problem is our wanting to be happy. I would suggest that actually the wisdom is wanting to be happy. The only problem is that we don't know how to do it. We just need to get better at finding this well-being, connection, richness, depth, satisfaction, whatever we want to call happiness. We just need to get better. We need to upgrade the whole system. But as we haven't figured that out and others haven't figured that out, it's completely heartbreaking, actually. It's like a mother looking at her little 3-year-old, and then they're sort of whining and crying. They just want to be happy, and they just can't figure it out. Something is wrong. Maybe they've got gas, or they're tired, or whatever. They can't figure it out. We're just like that. Everything we do, as Mingyur Rinpoche has demonstrated, remember with this video where he moved in his chair, he said, everything we do is to the end of some relief of distress and some discovery of relief. Everything we do, but it's not working. So we're all like the drunk guy in the office. So what I would like to do, we're going to do this once, maybe twice today. I would like it in a minute if Madeline would break us up in groups of 4 or something like that. And here's the question that I'd like you to just chat for a moment. I want you to imagine that we have a pill, in fact, and that in a minute, we're going to take that pill. And upon taking that pill, we have a deeply embodied experience and understanding of the fact that everybody wants to be happy, is exactly like us, and everybody screws it up just like us. And that's the reality for all of us. That is the reality for all of us. Ourselves, everybody we meet, we're strangely exactly the same. And the way we pull it off might be different, but it's all screwed up. If we really understood that, we took this pill, if we really understood that, how would our relationship to ourselves and the world change? The world with others, with our experience of others, how would it change? Does anybody not understand the question? We take a pill, you understand the fact that we're all the same and screwing it up. Not everybody is taking the pill, just the 12 of you or 11 of you. And it lasts for the next hour. Okay, Madeline, want to break us up? So let's just maybe 10 minutes max.
Oh, yeah.
Madeline. Hi. So the magic pill.
Can somebody repeat the assignment? I was busy setting up the breakout rooms.
Well, you take a magic pill, and for the next hour, you actually see that everybody is trying to be happy and free from suffering. That's all they're trying to do, and we're all doing it in our ineffectual, screwed up ways, all of us. Is that right? Is that the
Yeah.
assignment?
And then how would that change things?
So he died of colon cancer or stomach cancer of some kind. And they took him from Sikkim and they brought him to the United States to treat him. And on the way, they stopped over in Hong Kong for the night, and he was on a penthouse overlooking the night lights of Hong Kong. He walked out on the veranda and burst into tears. This is it. Yeah, that's what you're saying. So he had taken the pill. Maybe he made the pill. Okay, anybody else? Are you the least talkative Chicagoans on the globe? Anybody? Just break in.
You go.
Hi, and thank you, Tim, and thank you, Chicago, and Amy. And I felt like, um, I don't know if I found anything, Tim. I kind of feel like maybe there's less to point to. I mean, there's, and I often find I start with, may I be free from suffering. You know, may my partner, ex-partner be free from suffering, which I really heard during your talk, our relationship. And but like, there's so many things going on, and I'm so grateful to be here. But I still can't quite find, you know, myself in all of this. Just this freedom from suffering. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, David. Jill?
I'll go and then Jill. So what I was gonna say was, well, first of all, just thinking about Tim when you had said, if I can just move the needle for anybody, then it's worth it. So you've already done that for me, so thank you. So we're all good to go now. And what I would say, what came up for me was just like there would just be like a softening and kind of like an ease, like an easiness, and then like no enemies, you know, um, and and it felt so nice. Like I can feel it now. I can feel like my like tingling in my arms and legs, you know, and really, you know, kind of allowing myself to feel that way and to like, you know, I want that so badly to be happy, and like I'm screwing it up, and just sort of they're screwing it up, you know. So it doesn't matter if they're like, well, they don't want the same things I do, whatever. It's like, well, yeah, they're just screwing it up, you know, just like you're screwing it up, you know, just like the one over there is screwing it up too. And it just for a moment, it just felt like that, just like a real easiness and a softness. So thank you.
You know, in my way of thinking, is that if this is all we ever get, we have more than enough. Yeah, this is it, actually. Yeah. What else? Who else?
We talked about both of these things. Sadness was a big part of our discussion, that and amazement, just wow, look at all this, kind of like amazement, maybe even some overwhelm, like what do we do with all this? And I also thought a little bit about like how we could just drop the stories of like what Amy was saying. You know, everybody's drunk, or everybody's messed up, everybody's messing things up, and that allows some softness and loosening up and letting go, and adds to our well-being, or my well-being, of not feeling hurt or not feeling angry, because I just see more clearly somebody's affliction, and it's not a self or other, it's we're all in it. So there was the sadness that was a big part of our conversation. And then one more last thing, I was thinking that if we could move fast enough in this hour, transforming that sadness into loving kindness and compassion, so that we can think of skillful ways to be helpful. But that might not be enough time.
Yeah, we will get there, and we will get there. I mean, the rest, that's the next outflow from this experience. But, you know, this is the basis. This sadness finally gets us. It finally gets us to the starting gate. Everything comes from this. And without this, nothing comes. In fact, this sadness is considered to be so rich, to be so important. It's so fertile. There's so much here. It's everything. In fact, in the Tibetan tradition, there's a kind of a line that says that we refer to this as the genuine heart of sadness. This odd, unbearable place where we're beginning to open up and we're beginning to see how it is, and we want so badly to touch the world with this insight, and we can't. And that tension, that's the tension that we ride for the rest of the path, for the rest of our life. That's everything. That's all, that sadness, that is loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom. That's the kind of non-conceptual experience of loving kindness. This is why, one of my favorite gripes, this is why when we talk about happiness, we completely, totally sell the entire path short. Happiness is barely a distant cousin to this experience of richness that we're talking about here. It's barely a distant cousin. Yeah, good. Thank you, Jill. Anybody else? And we will get there. And uh, if it looks like we're at the end of the morning, which is we have 4 hours together all together with a half an hour break in the morning. If it's beginning to, raise your hand and say, you promised we'd get there, and we'll get there. But I think we're going to get there right away. Yeah. Who else?
One thing I did want to add too is just I'm so grateful and thankful, and I can even just feel it coming up in myself about this idea of this stress and the sadness as being, so important. It's almost like I'm reminded of like the tyranny of joy sometimes. It reminds me of like the movie Inside Out. The Pixar movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. And so joy is so they're inside a little girl's brain, and joy seems to be the leader, and sadness seems to be like the kind of the nemesis, the enemy. Sadness keeps coming in and screwing things up for joy. Joy's like, no, like just won't tolerate, right? And then as you start to see and go through the little girl's memories, it's the sadness that brings that is underneath everything. Like her sadness brings her friends to her. Her sadness, just all of this stuff, and that's what kind of that's what like what you're saying. To see the sadness is what opens our hearts, right?
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
And so I can just feel it coming up in myself, and like this idea that shouldn't we be able to sit with our sadness? It's not something to get through or push away or eradicate, but like to really invite to, for Red Bulls, day after day after day, So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Who else? Tom?
Excuse me. Call me self-absorbed, but it took me in a slightly different direction. I went back to, perhaps because of your earlier comment, being 15. And that was 60 years ago for me. And I pretty well remember it. And I looked back and I said, my goodness, I have applied myself diligently to all the wrong solutions and really learned the 4-square block map I was provided at that time of the world. And I've had a very rich life and very happy about that, except I'm still doing the same things that I was doing at 15. And what sums it up for me is I am that drunk under the lamppost in the night looking for my keys. Not because I think I lost them there or that I even know where I lost them, but because the light is better. And all of these simple techniques of screwing up for a lifetime and applying the same as inept solutions are suddenly swept away. And then this kind of practice, I find it's humorous in a way, it's ironic, and it's healing. And I don't feel, you fool. It's more like, well, I guess everybody does it this way. And so speaking for my troop of monkeys, which I fed and housed at age 15 and onward, I think I gave them a very pleasant life. They've had a lot to do. And I'm summing up here by saying that this is also a way of understanding that one looks in all the wrong places.
That's it. We're looking for love in all the wrong places. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Great. Who else?
So I'm Michelle, and we were talking about, my husband was, Tim was commenting about all these commercials on TV with the people take a pill and they're all happy. And I always say, if there's dancing, it's got to be a pill commercial. So I think we're also used to having something that transforms instantly and you get your results instantly. And so Jill was talking about maybe we need a slow release pill as opposed to one that only lasts for an hour. So, and I think our meditation practice is kind of trying to do that. Although I don't know.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So this is a slow release pill that releases actually for the rest of our life. It just never ends, actually. It gets deeper and richer, more poignant, more pointed as we go along. It gets worse rather than better. So before going on, anybody else want to share anything before we launch? So Derek?
I think a big thing with this feeling for me is just the sense that I'm not alone, and we're all in this together, and kind of in the same spot. And even though it's from suffering and maybe approaching trying to heal that suffering, and a lot of times the wrong way, the fact that we're all connected through that, it seems like a pretty powerful thing.
This is it. We finally enter the human family. We actually enter the world of beings. This is enormous, actually. This is it. In fact, well, we'll get there in just a second. So Derek, yeah, this is our entry into the human family. We become humans, finally. Well, I will go. Madeline, could you pull up the quote, "at this moment"? So this is, I think, one of the most beautiful lines in our tradition. At this moment, my birth has become fruitful. I have realized my human life. Today, I'm born into the family of the Buddha. Now I am a child of the Buddhas. So this moment that is being referred to here, this moment is when the spark, when this realization that we are one family and that we're called to do something. We're called now to respond. This is what it means to become a child of the Buddhas. In other words, to actually be within the awakened family. That's what this means. Those of you who have taken your Bodhisattva vows, you may not have known it, but those were some of the lines you recited. At this moment. So I've been so interested in these lines that I've asked many of my teachers, because I kept thinking, oh, it must be at this moment means that I have developed great insight, great wisdom, profound compassion, yada, yada, yada. And no, it's at this moment that now this arises in us, that we are part of one family, that we all have a collective problem and a collective goal and desire. When we realize this, this is what it means for our life to become, our birth to become fruitful. So now it only makes sense that we're called to do something. We're invited to step out and do something. And what we've just discovered is all we need. We can read texts on loving kindness and compassion and compassionate activity and on and on and on and on and on. But what we need, the sufficient condition, is what we've just discovered. And this became very, very crystal clear to me in another quote from one of Mingyur Rinpoche's 4 main teachers that crystallized this vision. Madeline, could you put up the only source? Would someone read this? Would somebody read this?
I can read it. Oh. Go ahead, Jill.
Okay. The only source of every kind of benefit for others is awareness of our own condition. When we know how to help ourselves and how to work with our own situation, our feelings of compassion arise spontaneously without the need to hold ourselves to the rules of behavior of any religious doctrine.
So this is it. Awareness of our own condition. when we understand this deeply, we don't need anything else. We don't even need the guidelines for compassion. It arises spontaneously. So how does it arise? There's many ways of understanding it. The classic, what the Buddha taught, it is said that in his first teaching on this, on compassion, that was in, many of you have heard of it, the Metta Sutta or the Maitri Bhavana Sutra. He likened this awakening, this calling, this urge to be like a mother. That now when this comes to us, when it dawns on us, it's completely spontaneous for us to want to reach out and do something. Any other response just doesn't make sense. It's not true to our experience. There'd be no way that this quality of freedom and openness could begin to dawn on us without us wanting to share it with others or to see it become true in others, with others. It's just the way our heart is. You know, for instance, if we were in a lifeboat, sorry, if we were in the Titanic and when the Titanic hit the iceberg and everybody, and someone was just spontaneously sort of thrown off the Titanic and just miraculously landed in a lifeboat, it would be unthinkable for that person not to have just one urge to go and bring other people in the lifeboat. It would be unthinkable. It would be contrary to human nature. So the Buddha encapsulated this in this sutra, in these lines. Want to bring it up? Just as a mother. You see it, Madeline? It's right after the only source of every kind of benefit. It's not there? Okay, so I'll read the line. So in my way of thinking, if there's only one line that we can remember to guide us in the rest of the path, frankly, it would be this. And the Buddha said, just as a mother would protect with her life her only child, just as a mother would protect with her life her own child, her only child, so one should cultivate a boundless mind towards all beings and friendliness towards the entire world. That's it. That's the direction. That's where we're going from here. So before we're going to go on for another 25 minutes, and then we're going to take a half-hour break. Anybody have a question before we go, Tom?
Thank you, Tim. And this is going back a little bit to the quote just before about I can't remember how it started, but it was basically knowing your own condition.
Yeah.
Because I'm on this path and I feel I have an intuition for that fruitfulness that, now my birth is fruitful. A little intuition for it and all the things that leads to, like, naturally towards action. The disturbance that I hit is I'm not a Buddhist. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I've been doing meditation, joy of living, practicing, but there are things in what I understand or misunderstand about the cosmology or the larger picture of reincarnation or all this other stuff that I just find disturbing, and it throws me off. And so I don't listen to it, and I just try to return to the simplicity of the sugar cookie that you're talking about, the crumb and the places that I find it. But I feel like I want someone with your authority to say, fine. Even though I hear that from other places, from Rinpoche and others, and Dalai Lama and stuff, you don't need to be a Buddhist or you don't need to become a Buddhist. And maybe I will, maybe that's the path, but I don't know, there's that, like when I hear that quote about learning about my own condition, which I feel like is what's happening, everything you say rings true and is very encouraging in that way. But then when I hear all the different teachings and all the, sometimes I think, why all of this teaching? Why all of these different, you know, I read Rinpoche's latest book and all the things about dying and how to die and the right way to do it and all the different layers and the levels and the things that happen. And I just got into this state of like, is this what this is about? Am I trying to practice so I can die properly? Like I want to center this experience of being alive as the whole thing and not worry about that. Like that's over my pay grade. Like I just want to say, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Tom, have you ever been in a faith tradition at all in your life?
I was born Jewish in a very remotely Jewish family, although I love many of the, I have an intuition for it, but I really haven't been. I have a lot of affection for Jewish thought, but I'm not deeply studied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've just bumped into my favorite topic in the world, but so I'll try to keep it very brief. But so is there anything that you've heard today that feels suspiciously Buddhist?
Nothing. That's my problem. Everything.
Okay, good. That's a good problem.
Great. Everything and sounds completely congruent with my own intuitions as I'm following this.
Okay, so here's one tip, and I'll comment on the rest of what you said because it's very interesting. One tip is to be disturbed is a good thing. Be disturbed is when we're disturbed, we're listening. And when we're disturbed, things have been shaken up a little bit. My first teacher said that resistance was the harbinger of wisdom. In other words, if we know how to hold on our disturbance in the right way, that breaks open into a level of wisdom. I'll never forget talking about the Jewish tradition. Years ago, I heard an interview with a woman who was the first rabbi, female rabbi of Los Angeles, whatever, you don't use the word diocese, but whatever, the Jewish community in Los Angeles, right? And she recounted her years in, is it rabbinical school or Talmudic school, or I don't know what the equivalent is. And, going, pouring through the Old Testament, which is, brutal is a nice way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
Particularly if you're a modern Californian woman. And she talked about the nights that she would just stay up crying and pulling her hair out. But she was held to it because she wanted to succeed and become a rabbi, et cetera, right? And she said that revealed levels of understanding and subtlety that never would have been revealed had she not been willing to go through the fire, as it were. So all that is to say, cognitive dissonance, irritation, frustration, resistance, this is not a bad sign. And your desire to find something for yourself is evident by the fact that you're here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So that's the first thing. Second of all, not to be clever, but the Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. He didn't think of this as, this was not his thing.
Mm-hmm.
He never talked about, the future Buddhism or something like that. So what's happened is that I think, well, maybe not like the Christian tradition, but what we have is some simple truths that we've shared today that have been mined and contemplated and brought to life by 2,500 years of dedicated people. And they have a lot to say. It all seems like it's a lot because it comes to us in our screen and the internet, But at the time, it was a little bit of tidbit here that goes off to some weird remote valley in Tibet or off to Persia somewhere. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't this sort of like monolithic thing that's called Buddhism. You know, it's a succession of kind, brilliant people putting down their observations about something in the same way that well, we may talk a little bit about ethical conduct today. It's the same way that the 10 Commandments aren't meant to be some sort of you know, police state. They're tips from the pros. Like, you want to have a nice life, don't sleep with your neighbor's wife. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So we need to sort of we need to calibrate how we listen to this material. This material has been kindly offered by people who stayed up with candlelight, you know what I mean, late in the night, writing these things down. For what? So what we're talking about here is not some Buddhist thing, although of course it's carried in what is now called Buddhism. But we would like to think that, you know, in fact, it's said, the Buddha talked about the 4 reliances, and I can't remember them exactly. He said, don't rely on the word, rely on the meaning. Don't rely on the meaning, rely on the experience. Don't rely on the experience, rely on sort of one's basic nature. In other words, he very clearly said, don't rely on that stuff. Rely on how it aggregates and percolates in your heart. That's very clear. I mean, this was a very clear, you know, teaching from the Buddha. So, you know, those of you, well, none of you do, but, you know, I'm passionate about interfaith dialogue, and I'm a sort of armchair theologian. And I really have a lot of feeling and appreciation for this whole faith thing. So I would just sort of to cap it off, I would really invite us to have faith in our own have faith and curiosity, as we were saying this morning, about our own condition. Have faith that there's possibility of that condition opening up. Have faith that it's possible for us to be connected in this world, and in so doing, make this life meaningful. And for me, that's the entirety. The rest is details, actually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was taking your invitation to break in because I felt like,
No,
you
it's
know, you
good.
said
I'm happy.
and now I feel like, oh no, you're derailing the program. So with your
No. I like this. This is these derailings. I was saying to Amy and Matt on this morning, this is my favorite, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Honestly, thank you. Really, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever.
Well, I appreciated that
I just,
invitation. Wow.
I just coincidentally yesterday was listening to a BBC special that was aired, I think, you know, like 60 or 70 years ago on Vivekananda. Vivekananda was an Indian extraordinary guy who founded the Parliament of World Religions, and it since has taken on its own thing. And that was his message, actually, was don't become something else. My first teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, was very clear about that. He said, you honor your own tradition, whatever that might be, honor that, because that's how we are. Yeah, good. Anybody else before we go on? David?
Yeah, I never talk about this, but I just quickly want to say that, you know, how much my Catholic upbringing has influenced me. I don't really pay attention to it. It feels so very top heavy. You know, I feel like I respect our new Pope a lot, but still so steeped in the Vatican's history. And, you know, I don't know if this is, maybe I am derailing, but, and like birth control or, you know, even though I'm a man, you know, it seems it's hard for me to reconnect at all to it. That's all I want to
Yeah,
say.
of course.
Thank you.
And then
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Amy.
I was just thinking about when the Dalai Lama came to Chicago several years ago, promoting his book, like that True Kinship Among Faiths. and he came and he was on the stage with, with rabbis and some priests and some nuns, and talking about if you took the world's religions and like kind of ran their spectrum, in a row, and then like lined them up in columns, that you would have more people that you shared values with in your column than in necessarily in the row of your own religion, and like this idea that really there's nothing that's terribly contradictory among these world faiths. And so to sort of, like Rinpoche so kindly invites people, you don't have to be a Buddhist. You can use his meditation teachings to increase your practice of Catholicism. I mean, it's all good. So.
Yeah, one time I was with a friend and we went again to Trungpa Rinpoche, the great Trungpa Rinpoche. And my friend said, Rinpoche, he says, why are so many Buddhists so screwed up? Trungpa Rinpoche so kindly looked at him and he said, there is Buddhism and there are people. Don't mix the two up. So I think that there's the truth of our traditions, of all the traditions, and that what we've done to completely screw them up. And we need to, I think, be willing to go back and to imagine the initial beauty, depth, and wisdom of those traditions that were appropriate at the time, in the moment, that were culturally placed, and go back and celebrate that, and then be discerning about the rest, all the issues that come with it. Be discerning about it. I mean, I would invite us all those of us who say we're Buddhists. I would encourage us to have that same quality of discernment. Like I've already tipped my hand today about my frustration with the kind of biblical fire and brimstone language, that the problem is because you want your own happiness. I think that's incredibly, it's just insane. But it was taught at a time when all traditions across the globe were taught in very black and white ways, because they were to illiterate, congregations, or whatever. That worked. And in other words, if you create this harm, then you'll go to hell. That worked at that time. Those of people who know about the history of religions know that it's a certain age when that was taught, and we borrow that to this day. Those of us who are modern Buddhists are still inspired and labored by those images, and I think it's time to completely move past it. So I think that we should have that same, without losing our discernment and without being sloppy. We should be invited to go to the essence of the whatever teachings of any tradition, and find the humanity and the peace of that is actually liberating, and be willing to make that distinction between the liberation aspect and the imprisonment aspect, you could say. Yeah, does that make sense, Amy? Yeah, Madeline?
I was just the other day, I was in a group and I heard a story. One of the people in the group had a friend who had been raised in the Christian tradition, but had been a Zen Buddhist practitioner for decades and decades. And this person is now in hospice. They're on their deathbed, basically. And when the person I was talking to went to see them, that person said, well, I've decided to revert to Christianity. It's helping me now. Which the person I was talking to was fine with that. It wasn't, nobody felt like rejected or anything. But it was interesting to me that those things are laid down deep, and they're kind of in some ways the foundation of who we are, and that we might return to them at the end of life makes a lot of sense.
The best way to die, to get back to what Tom was saying, the best way to die, in fact, all the teachings around death that are like ridiculously complex and voluminous, is to die relaxed and with confidence. So if the image of Christ, or whatever comes to their mind, that gives them confidence and peace, it's the perfect tradition. It is the perfect perfect tradition. It is the perfect tradition. When I die, I aspire at the moment of death to invoke my my Jesus Christ, which was Mingyur Rinpoche's father. It's not complex, but we die with ease, we die with confidence. And if someone returns, you know, the one of I think thing that is very interesting, I think that the archetype of Christ and Mary and the whole thing, just that archetype is deep in us as Westerners. So, you know, in many ways, it's easier for me to imagine, you know, Mary than it is White Tara, because these are archetypical. Is that so? I think that's beautiful. That someone, thank goodness that they find something at the end of their life. I mean, how wonderful. We should celebrate that. Yeah. Which you are. I know you are, Madeline. Yeah. Yvonne?
I just wanted to say that there's the original Buddha, Jesus, whatever, and they said what they said. And after that, there's the rest of us humans, and people have written volumes about all of those teachings. And those people, doesn't it come back, they wanted to be happy and free from suffering and may not have understood it in a way that we would choose to honor it now. In other words, to say I could write a book about Norwegian Lutheran Church, and you know, it would come through my desire to be free from suffering and the unhealed places within me. And so it might not be truth with a capital T or whatever. So I feel like I like to go back, and nobody knows for sure what Jesus said, but I like to go back to what he said that makes sense in the context of, and Buddha also, of compassion and you know, he was a wonderful example of the way to be happy and free from suffering and forgiving and all of those things. I mean, it's just amazing. But that doesn't mean I have to throw out all of that because somebody has written a book proving that what he said means that we should go to war and we should imprison people that are Muslim or whatever. You know, that's going to happen because from the very beginning of this session that we're doing, you know, we're just kind of doing the best we can. And it doesn't mean that people aren't going to get a lot of power and write books that seem heartbreaking.
Yeah. So I think we're all agreeing that the kernel of the truth in all traditions is inspired, and that we've screwed it up. We've contorted it over the years, but the essential truth is the essential truth really is the golden rule, and the rest is details in any tradition. And I think most traditions agree with that. The rest is details. So for instance, even in the Christian church, you know, you have the side of the church that says, you know, faith is sufficient. Another side of the church that says it's works, it's what you do. Our tradition has all of that. The paramitas are the compassionate work. So the paradigms are the same. They're just being commented on at different times by different people through different lenses, different mouthpiece. But I think that yeah, I think we get it. I think we all agree on that. Yeah, it's really beautiful. So all that is to say, to go back to what Tom was saying, again, I think it's good for us to be bothered by these questions and to engage them, because on the other side of that engagement is tremendous opening. is tremendous liberation. It's really, really, really beautiful. So, you know, and that's true of those of us who say we're Buddhists. I think we should be bothered by some things we've heard, because we'll come through to the other side. And the other side is we all agree on once we get to the other side. So, Jill, would you remind me what you said you wanted to get to today before it's over? Because we're just about to take a break. Oh no, we're not just about to. Are we? No, we're past break time, aren't we? Yeah. Okay.
I think we're at the exactly perfect time.
Okay. Okay.
And it'll work out beautifully this way. So
okay. So Jill, remind me, because it will inform what we do after we come back from our break.
Well, all I said was that if we could take all this sadness and transform it into loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, so that we can be skillful to do something about all that we see and be helpful.
Okay, that's where we're going to launch when we come back. So let's take a half-hour break. Is that okay? All right, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
I just posted a clip by a hero of mine, Father Gregory Boyle. He is a Jesuit priest who runs Homeboy Industries. It's an enormous organization that works with gangs in Los Angeles. And I don't know anybody whose personal example and eloquence matches his in terms of engaged compassion. So I encourage you to watch it. It's breathtakingly good. And so, yeah. So as you can tell, I've been interested in this stuff for a very, very long time. And those who exemplify and are able to articulate all these kinds of principles, they're heroes of mine. So this is one of the ways I train personally, as I kind of populate my head with my heroes. Maybe it's an American boy way of doing things, but that's the way I've always done it. Principally, Mingyur Rinpoche's father. And don't get me talking about Mingyur Rinpoche's father, because we'd run out of time fast. Okay. So is everybody here and ready to go for an hour and 45 minutes? Anything we need to consider, worry about, talk about, remember? Anybody? So how many, Amy, am I right that you guys have been taking the Paramita course?
not the one online together as a group.
I see.
Mioshin came and did the Paramitas workshop with us a few years back.
Oh, I see. Okay. So where I want to go in the next little bit is I want to just revisit a little bit the logic of where we go with this, and some sort of structures about how we understand this natural unfolding, this natural opening up. And from the point of view of the path that we share, these are articulated in the unfolding of this desire to be of benefit, and the aspiration or the determination to continue to work with ourselves so that we can have the quality of skill and love and compassion necessary to pull off our aspiration to benefit as we open up. And so what I want to do is we're going to just touch a little bit on what we refer to as the four boundless attitudes, or the four immeasurables, which will probably be review for you, but I'm going to review them really quickly from the point of view of this spontaneous expression, rather than from the point of view of them being practices. Then what I want to do is I want to touch on the first of the four transcendental activities or paramitas, which is generosity, because generosity then becomes the kind of the atmosphere or the environment, internal environment that we play out the rest of our that we play out whatever we do. Everything then becomes a kind of follow-on from a basic attitude of generosity. Then I'm going to add a second piece to this, the generosity, which is a certain wisdom piece that I find to be incredibly compelling and has really informed me deeply in the last years. And so, and then we'll have time to hang out like we did earlier this morning. So again, as I said before, please, I really invite you to interrupt me, to go off topic, to do anything. So this is your time, and we only have a little bit left. So now, as we said before we took a break, now we're compelled, we're called to respond to what we've experienced, to respond to this wisdom that shows us that actually my own struggle, my own distress, at the very core is wisdom itself, is loving kindness and compassion itself. And that based on that relationship to our own distress, we sat down and we began to take stock, and we began to investigate, become curious, with a certain kind of guts to really work with ourselves, to hear ourselves, to be present, to be patient, to be open, to create that holding environment. Those of you who know mental health work a little bit, this holding environment, this is self-psychotherapy. I don't know if that's a term. Maybe that's the new thing we should write books about. Well, there's a good idea. But nonetheless, I mean, when you can sit with yourself with a quality of curiosity, you hear monkeys' stories, and there's a kind of openness and a willingness to hold that patiently, lovingly, empathetically. That's the psychotherapeutic environment. That's what it is. And the willingness to bring awareness to whatever we discover, that's liberating. As Mingyur Rinpoche said, awareness is liberating. So just that gesture, the willingness to sit down, to be present with ourselves, to listen to ourselves without manipulating, shutting ourselves down, twisting ourselves into some spiritual contortion, just be present. Imagine this as an attitude in our entire life, first regarding ourselves. This kind of warmth, this kind of acceptance, this friendliness, with a little bit of, there are times we can say, okay, monkey, now you got to go that way, or now you got to put the bottle down. That's kindness, that's love. We can do that. We can develop that kind of inner relationship with the warmth and the intelligence and the precision to grow and to heal. So then, as we said, this naturally begins to open up, and this becomes this sadness, this insight that everybody is just like us. We're just trying to do the best we can, and we're screwing it up. For those of you of a certain age, I think there was a Frank Zappa song that said something like, "We're all bozos on this bus." So that's the insight that Frank Zappa had, right? We're all crazy. We are crazy. We're just crazier than shit, right? It's true. It's heartbreaking. And it breaks our heart open. And in that openness, we touch others. And that warmth, the sadness that we were referring to before, this further melts the barriers between ourselves and others. In fact, in our tradition, particularly in the Vajrayana tradition, we use that language about melting. That this sensitivity, this heartbreak opens us up, and that opening further softens the barriers, whatever barriers or distinctions we might have between oneself and others. I remember hearing Mingyur Rinpoche's brother Sogni Rinpoche saying something that was really helpful to me about this, that all of that energy that we have, that we call grasping, right? Self-grasping, this boogeyman of self-grasping, all this worrying about ourselves and worrying like this, right? again, like I said, traditionally that was seen as the problem. I would suggest that that could be seen as the beginning of the solution, that we are worried about ourselves. There is something wrong. And as we said earlier, as we work with this, that softens, it softens and softens and softens, opens up. And as Sogno Rinpoche, Mingyur Rinpoche's brother said, when that happens, we don't lose that energy. That energy now naturally turns outward as a radiance of care for others. So in so many ways, the word ego in Buddhist lexicon doesn't mean the kind of ego like a Freudian ego. What ego means holding on. The word means self-grasping. Ego is not a noun. Ego is not some problem that we need to get rid of. Ego is a verb, if that makes sense. When that opens and softens and opens up and loosens, that is what we refer to as egoless, because the grasping is gone. That's synonymous with emptiness. Within that emptiness is great compassion. This is why those of you who have studied the emptiness stuff, this is why emptiness and compassion arise together. They arise spontaneously together. And we could talk a lot about that. That's actually an important point that I wasn't going to mention. But anyway, so we open up, we begin to radiate outward. Again, this is our bridge to the world. And walking that bridge is the rest of our life. So then we spontaneously, in the same way we want ourselves to be happy, we want others to be happy. This is the first of the attitudes of someone on the path to awakening, the attitude of loving kindness. We know that. I'm just putting this in context. Similarly, our spontaneous desire to be free of suffering, this is compassion. And now that it's open and becomes more global, right? Then it begins to free flow outwards as a radiance of what we've discovered. And this discovery actually is a discovery here of joy. What we discover is deep appreciation for what is here, what we discover here, our fundamental richness. We take delight in the fact that we have this opportunity to do this at all in this life. We take delight in the fact that we have enough suffering, that we want to do something. We have enough wisdom that we know what to do, and we have people and traditions and guidance and friends to help us along the way. We take joy in that. This is what we refer to as appreciative joy. We have this precious human existence to do something. We could talk for days just on this single piece. That we have the chance once and for all to resolve this conflicted, confused aspect of mind and access the wisdom, the peace, the beauty, the profundity, the depth that is there, that is our human inheritance, to access our fundamental goodness, you could say. This is a cause of joy. All we need to do this, all we need to find this kind of happiness or joy is appreciation. The thing that blocks us from being happy is appreciating what we have. This is so important. This is why we work with the coverings that keep us from appreciating that, which is afflictive emotions. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about today. We have a chance to not carry the burden of our confused mind our afflictive mind, the aspect of our mind that is afflictive, with anger and jealousy and confusion and frustration and all this stuff, right? Grumpiness, moodiness, opinionatedness, all the bullshit that we carry, right? We have a chance once and for all to gift our next life, our next me, a free and open mind and heart. So by the way, Tom, this is why the contemplation of death is so important. Because the suggestion here, and it's a suggestion, that similarly, when we go to bed at night, the crap that we take in our mind when we go to sleep, we wake up with that. Similarly, when we die, we wake up in our next life burdened by the nightmares that we'd had in the lifetime before. That is what incarnates, is our confusion. Sorry. Just like waking up in the morning. So we can take that as being literally true, or we could simply take that, if that doesn't make sense of it to us, we could take that as an inspiration to wake up in the next moment, whatever that next moment would be, unburdened by the restrictive, confused patterns that we hold right now. So this is appreciation, appreciative joy, appreciating the richness of our fundamental kindness, the sweetness, the goodness, the good things we do, the good things we have, the good things that are available to us, our good intentions, to appreciate that. If we don't appreciate, there's no point in having it. Appreciating the beautiful places we live, the clean air, the relatively clean air, the relatively clean streets, the good food that we can get, how convenient everything is. It's insane. You know, they say you don't know what you got until it's gone. This is one of the byproducts of my living in Nepal for 12 years. And this was before Nepal had much stuff. Everything was a delight. A warm shower was an incredible gift. Sun coming through the window in the winter to warm up the room was a tremendous gift. If we found an old plastic jar somewhere, we could reuse it. It was a gift. It was amazing. I've never really, that has affected me deeply, actually, that experience. So this is appreciative joy. Before we go on, any questions about appreciative joy? This issue of joy, and we'll talk a little bit more, is so central, so important, and so simple. Any questions about that?
I have a question. I'm sorry I came on late. Probably missed.
You missed all the important stuff.
I missed all the important stuff. But any recommendations to cultivate appreciative joy? Like, would you just say our meditation practice?
Pay attention.
Or pay attention.
Just no, not meditation, nothing.
Okay.
Just open our eyes.
All right.
In fact, I will read to you. You missed the fact that I'm a quote hound.
Oh,
and
nice.
I will read to you, because I'm dim-witted, so I can understand short quotes.
Yeah.
And also these happen to be quotes from my teachers, so that so they'd affected me deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked me how to work with this appreciative joy. So of course, you know, in the classic teachings, they talk about contemplating the four thoughts that turn the mind. Yes. The preciousness of this human life, how fleeting it is. So that this is considered to be the kind of central contemplation. But personally, I've been very informed by this particular instruction from my first teacher. And I'll read it to you and let the words sink in, because these words are true now. And when we get to the very far end of the path, the instruction is just the same. So he said, look, this is your world. You can't not look. There is no other world. This is your world. It is your feast. You inherited this. You inherited these eyeballs. You inherited this world of color. Look at the greatness of the whole thing. Look, don't hesitate. Look, open your eyes, don't blink, and look, look, look further. So I think that's the practice. It's
Thank
just
you.
seeing what's there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to take up any more time for repetition.
No, we have plenty of time. Anything more, Allison? We have plenty of time.
No, maybe I can get a Zoom recording
Yeah.
and catch up on
Yeah.
what you
Great.
said before, but that's wonderful. Thank you.
So that's the first kind of joy, appreciative joy. Appreciative joy is so simple that our complex, speedy minds just can't imagine. We have to think that there's some elaborate practice we have to do to just open our eyes and take a look at you know what I mean? Just take a look. The second kind of joy, so here again, we're talking about this, what we call the four boundless attitudes, sometimes referred to as aspiration bodhicitta. In other words, how we aspire. This is the kind of heart that we develop, the inner environment that we develop, first of love and compassion, not in particularly that order, because these are all interchangeable. It's not a step-by-step thing, even though in the Joy of Living level 2, it's taught as a step-by-step thing. Here, these don't need to be understood as practices, but rather expressions of this insight that we're beginning to have about ourselves and about others. So then the third is joy, and there's two kinds of joy, appreciative joy and sympathetic joy. If there, how can I say? As I get more dim-witted, as I get older, if I can hang on to one single practice in what has been 45 years of training, it's this practice of sympathetic joy. There's no practice imaginable that is more beautiful, more profound, simpler and faster than this practice. And it is simply, as many of you know, to take delight in others' delight. It's as simple as that. Just as a mother would her child, right? Who among you are parents, mothers or fathers? Okay, not to be exclusionary, but you have a leg up on this. And the rest of you also, if you've ever had a dog or a good friend, a young friend, when they're happy, we're happy. A mother's happiness is their baby's happiness. That's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. In fact, talking about ego, that's the beauty of children or pets. That actually this grasping that we call ego, it doesn't go away, it actually gets bigger. We become more interested in more and more and more, and we're willing to delight and further delight, if that makes sense. In fact, our so-called ego, our sphere of concern gets so big that the locus, the middle of it just explodes, and it's just one free-floating cloud of care. So sympathetic joy is our willingness to interrupt our habitual bad attitude. So it goes like this. We're all good people. Some of us, for better or for worse, consider ourselves to be Buddhists. Some consider ourselves to be something else. But we're all good people. You wouldn't be here, right? Exploring this. So you say, oh yes, I want everybody to be happy, and I want to have love and compassion, right? So if in the days when we're walking down on the street, or we're walking down down along the street, maybe it's in the summer, you're walking down along the Lakeshore Drive, and you hear a bunch of teenage boys, talking trash and, like having a good time. And immediately we think, oh, those damn kids, would they shut up? I bet they're drinking and don't they have anything better to do? Right? Their laughter is a sign that they're happy. And immediately we can't stand it. We can't handle it. We can't just simply, it's like, oh, how wonderful. They're happy. To delight in happiness. Their happiness, not our idea of what they should be doing on a Saturday afternoon. You should be doing something, meaningful, like working in a soup kitchen, or at least meditating or something, No, they're out playing football on the lake. If we can attune our mind in this way, there's no end to happiness. There's no end to it. It's everywhere. Everywhere. It's just oozing out of everything and everyone. There is a beautiful practice around this that I'll just give you as a tip. We could spend a morning someday in the future just talking about this one thing, which is when you look at people, we need to know how to look at people. When you look at people, we can see if we, like normally when we look at people, we go, I don't know about them. That shirt's ugly. Why do they have those tattoos? What's wrong with their hair? You know what I mean? Like, okay, so we catch ourselves going down that tube. And the practice is to actually just sort of shake ourselves. Okay, let's take another look, right? If we take another look, we can see their beauty. Like we see so much when we look at people. You know, like if we look at someone who has earrings, for instance, earrings aren't free and they're not random. Whoever buys the earrings, I used to say girls who buy earrings, but everybody buys earrings now, right? They go to the they go to the department store, wherever they go, right? And they look at the mirror and they go, they try this and try that. And of the 10,000 pairs, they find one, they think, wow, I look good in this, right? That's love, right? That's wanting to be connected to others. Oh, so-and-so is going to think I look really good in these earrings, right? The way people comb our hair or not, right? It's so beautiful. Of all the t-shirts, you know, why did that guy pick that t-shirt? Because it's meaningful to him. And if we clue into that, there's no end to it. There's no end to our ability to connect to the beauty and the joy and the sweetness of others. This is a practice that Pema and I learned from our first teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, and we call it soft spot practice, where the idea is that soft spot is the place where our goodness, people's goodness is just leaking out of them and we can just see it. One of the ways I was reminded to practice this, or jolted into practice this, that I live in the mountains of Colorado, and Denver is about 2.5 hours away on a long, windy, about half of it is a long, windy, difficult road. And because I travel a lot, I used to travel a lot. Often I have to go to Denver if I can't get flights out of my small town, you know, to go teach. And so one day in the winter, I was following this semi in this small road, and that's a disaster because in order to pass them, you have to get close enough so that you can scoot around them. But if you get close, they throw up gravel and it destroys your car and your windshield. So everybody in Colorado has a broken windshield. And so I'm going down, I'm following this truck, and I'm getting really, really irritated. And I'm really like all puffed up. So finally we get to this little town where he pulled off to the side of the road, I think to get gas. And just as he pulled off, and just as I was about to pass him, he opens his door and this big burly trucker gets out and he's got a little puppy in his hands. He stopped his truck so the puppy could pee. That's his soft spot. And it just completely shattered me. It's like, oh my God, I had made this trucker into some sort of demon. And look, he's just like me, right? So the walk around practice of this is the practice of just like me. Just looking wherever you look and just saying, oh, they're just like me. They like their shirt, I like my shirt. They have a beard, I have a beard. They have tattoos, I have. There's no end to our ability to connect with others. And it's a tilt of the head. It's nothing more than that. It's a willingness to see past our own fog of idiocy. It's as simple, honestly. And when we're willing to do that, our whole world opens up. There's no end to joy. There's no end to delight. So this is called appreciative, sort of sympathetic joy, that we align with each other in joy. Any question about the joy piece before we move on? Yeah, David.
Thank you
You're
so
muted.
much.
There you go.
Thank you so much, sir. I just want to say that I feel feel like even right now, very much, I often have a very challenging time, like not going through the steps with, happiness. And I often think, that there's a lot of compassion work I need to do even before I get to the happiness. And then, and then the compassion, and then the compassion again, and, and then before I get to joy. And I've been doing a lot of reflection on just noticing the positive um, recently, or wishing people well, kindness,
Yeah, great.
but just something in me that doesn't quite trust that kind of um, sympathetic aspect. I feel like it dragged into it, and like when I just look outwardly, you know, solely outwardly, that's just very disorienting for me. Thank you.
So don't look solely outwardly. Appreciate yourself. Look at the fact that you wore that shirt and not some other shirt, that you put a flower in the corner of your room, that you care, that you groom yourself. It's the same. You and others is the same. So David, one really quick suggestion for you and all of us. Compassion is not work. If compassion is work, stop doing it. Please, I beg you, stop doing it. Like stop, immediately stop doing it. Back up. Honestly, I'm not joking. I don't mean to be, I'm not joking here. Compassion is not work. And it's one of the shadows of the Buddhist tradition becoming so highly organized and regimented. It's just done this by mistake over 2,000 years. But that becomes its own problem. Compassion is not work. Your own care for yourself, that's compassion. You don't need to work on that. Yeah, Amy?
I so appreciate you saying that. It just brings to mind one of the things that Rinpoche said in 2019, the last time we all got to be together. And he was talking about the allowing. So just allowing, allow, it's all allowed. And in the allowing is the compassion.
Oh, beautiful.
Allowing is the forgiveness. And that just stuck with me so much because I think about, and it's like when I struggle, my therapist was like, that's not compassionate. You're not being compassionate. And it's like, I know, and I'm allowed to, this is allowed to be here. This is allowed to come up. And just allowing that, I can feel the compassion much more than if I was trying to apply compassion to what's coming up. So I really think just that idea of whatever, like when you were saying the resistance, whatever it is, just allow it to be there. Just, I can't do this. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you just made me think of something that, so if we want to do something that we call compassion, it's this tilt of the head. Just change our outlook. That's it. Nothing more. Just tilt our head a little bit and change our outlook. It's as simple as that. If we've got to work on something. So that's joy. The third one then is as we continue to open further, we want everybody to be happy, to be free, to have friends, to be known, to be loved, to be understood. We want everybody. To want it for certain people and others begins to just not make any sense anymore. This is called equanimity. There's a number of ways of talking about equanimity, but this is the way I talk about it. The idea that our care and concern and interest and connection is to everybody. So in some ways, the most kind of primal example that we have in our life of love and compassion and care is with our own kind, our own babies, for instance. So this is the kind of love of a mother or father, right? They're really, like all over their little kids, and this is my family, and it's beautiful, but it's pretty tight. So then as we become grandparents, it's like, oh, then it's like we sort of like that opens up, and there's an attitude of greater openness, greater tenderness, greater kindness. This is why all the little kids love their grannies, because granny is not so uptight as mom, right? Granny just goes ahead and gives me a treat without having to run me through the lecture and the test. how many of you had today, and do you know what this does to your teeth? Yada, 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 right? There's sugar in this, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. The sugar police. My daughter was the sugar police to my grandson. And then as this continues to open up in my way of imagination, it becomes like great granny. All great grannies, you know, at the time for a family reunion, there's like dozens of kids, and she has no idea whether they're friends of her great grandkids or they're people who just came in off the street for a good meal. She doesn't care. She's sort of in the background, kind of drooling a little bit, you know, and just loves them all. We could be like that. That's equanimity. When I was training in graduate school, I was training in social work and clinical social work at the University of Chicago. And my placement was at Children's Hospital downtown. And my field supervisor was an old woman. She was quite a character. She was an older Black woman whose husband was a jazz pianist, and they had lived in Europe where jazz was a big thing. So she's, you know, she very elegant because she took that from her European roots. And I'll never forget in the day room, you know, where all the kids would play, they'd be there to play. She'd kind of sit in the corner. She wouldn't do much. She'd kind of sit in the corner and she would say, "Oh, Johnny, oh, look at Johnny. He's a little upset today because yesterday Mary didn't pay attention to him. So he woke up upset today. And so he's isolating himself. And look at George over there." And she would have, there was such openness and such interest that she knew everybody's thing. And was it compassion? It was just, you know, it was attention. It was so, it was, and she had a kind of an aura around her of that great grandmotherly kind of love. And the kids just loved her. They'd come and jump in her lap, and, you know, they used her as kind of piece of the furniture. I learned so much just by observing what she said, who she was in her example of deep care and compassion. So this is the 4 immeasurables. This is the kind of heart that we take into the world. And then the rest is what we do. It's how we pull it off. And in the Buddhist tradition, this is sometimes, if that's aspiration bodhicitta, so then we talk about application. So now sometimes we talk about the transcendental activities or the transcendent activities of the paramitas. And as you know, we talk about these from the point of view of compassion, generosity, ethical conduct, patience, enthusiasm, meditation, and wisdom. These aren't linear, they intertwine again, but they're then how we train to be, how we train to pull it off, how we train to deport ourselves in the world. So today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the first, generosity, because everything flows from this attitude of generosity. Generosity is, again, an extension that we've already talked about, of this openness, of this lack of constriction, of this tenderness, this connection with others, knowing that others are just like me. So the care I give myself and the care I give others actually doesn't make any difference anymore. It's this tremendous openness. This is a kind of a mind and a heart of letting go. This is generosity. It's a quality of communication beyond defensiveness, beyond irritation, a willingness to surrender to the situation, to surrender to our world. This quality of being willing to surrender is not some kind of martyrdom. This surrender is an expression of our own inner richness that we've already found, that we've already appreciated about ourselves. This enormity of our care, our tenderness, our kindness, that is only made greater by offering it up. The Buddha said, thousands of candles can be lighted but from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. This is generosity. Opening, opening, opening. The reason that generosity, well, I'll ask you really quickly. Why would generosity and an insight or the dawning of openness or emptiness, why would they come together? Why would they be linked? Because there's nothing here. There's no big thing here that we have to hold on to, right? We just begin, as Mingyur Rinpoche says so often, that a better way of understanding emptiness is openness. So when we begin to open up, the centrality of me and my needs and my thing and what I need and want and demand and believe and all that stuff, it just begins to dissolve. Less me, more you. When I'm not standing in the middle, then the quality of heart just gets radiated. This is why the idea of working on compassion isn't so helpful, because there's still me doing something. And when there's me doing something, there's you who either will accept my compassion, good advice and recommendation for all the books you're supposed to read or not, right? It becomes very sort of goal oriented. It's like, I'm going to help that person. I'm going to help that person. That's not compassion. Compassion is an open feast. It's like making a feast and putting it out on the sidewalk, and then anybody can have it. It's an expression of our richness. It's a kind of the ultimate sharing. Amy?
Well, this just brings to mind I got my Power Me to Practice cards, and the quote from this morning was, to be generous doesn't merely mean to give with bias and partiality. It means to be profoundly free from attachment to anything whatsoever. And that's from Padmasambhava. And that was just like what you're saying, like there's nothing there to be attached to. And then also like that idea of a center, it's not that it's radiating out from me, the whole thing just drops out. Yeah. And then again, there's just like this easiness.
Yeah, it's easy. There's no alternative, because that's what's left. That's what's left. That's what's left when we get out of the way. This is actually, in many ways, the rest of the journey is just messing with this thing here. When we open up, what's left is how can I say? In this discussion, when we talk about there's nothing in the center, we can't find something here that we call me. But in the not finding, there is something left. There's an environment, there's an atmosphere, there's goodness, there's inherent love and compassion. That the non-finding reveals the abiding love and compassion that's there, and it becomes untethered and it radiates out. This is a little bit hard to understand, but easy to experience, actually, frankly. When we're with our little kitties or our little grandkitties or whatever, and we just love them so much, we just get engaged in them. And for a moment here and there, we forget ourselves. There's a beautiful Zen, I can't stand Zen sayings because I can never understand them, but there's one that really resonates with me. And it says, something to the effect, to follow the way is to know the self. To know the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by 10,000 things. So beautiful. When we get out of the way, everything touches us. Khandro Rinpoche said, practice compassion like the wind blows and the sun shines. The sun shines doesn't say, okay, I'm Mr. Sun and I'm going to warm you up down there in North Dakota. It doesn't say that. Or does it have the rest of the conversation, which is, if you don't appreciate the fact that I've warmed you up, then I'm going to turn the sun off next time. The sun doesn't say that. The nature of the sun is to shine and to warm. So that's what we do. This takes time. This is where we move from that parent level of compassion and love to the grandparent, to the great-grandparent. The great-grandparent is just, okay, come on. I'll kiss you wherever you are, who you are. I'll give you a hug. I can't even see you, but I'll hug you. The same with the wind. When that is, the middle is gone, the rest just completely explodes open. It is, this goes beyond theory. This is something that we can experience. Everybody has had the experience of being around someone that we sense that quality of depth, that openness. I can tell you that, you know, when I used to go see Mingyur Rinpoche's father up in his hermitage, it was always a lot of trouble to get there for a whole bunch of reasons. And the road was bad. And then you had to, I had a motorcycle, I had to park my motorcycle and then walk up the hill to his hermitage. And every time I would be grumpy because it would be hot, because it was a southern facing thing and I'd be hot and dusty. And there was always a lot of grief walking up the hill. And every time at a certain place, it was almost the same step. It was like the sun in my body just opened up and everything just went away. And then I would look up and realize, okay, I'm about 150 feet from his room. And he had a radius around him that it was almost impossible to even keep a thought in your mind. That's the power of that quality of openness. Almost overwhelming. Everybody has felt this around someone. Everybody has felt this around someone. I play a game of like noticing it when I can notice it, the quality of openness and the radiance that comes from that. Jill, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. This is beautiful. I appreciate it very much. And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask about situations where I don't want to be complacent. I want to be generous, but also skillful and protective when I need to be. And is that appropriate for this conversation?
Yeah. I mean, the essence of compassion. So we can make a distinction between the essence of compassion and the expression of compassion. So the essence of compassion is a little bit more like what we've been talking about, which is this natural urge to respond. So I've been talking about that more because if we just talk about how to do it, then it just becomes more stuff that's disconnected from the urge. And then it becomes plastic, if that makes sense. But then in terms of like how to do what you do, then that's a calculation. Do I have the capacity? Is now the time? Is now the place? Are they receptive to me? Do they have the resources I need to, you know, am I the one? Long ago, I learned that giving my ex-wife advice didn't end well. However good the damn advice was, I wasn't the person. So this is what we call skillful means, is to engage skillfully. It doesn't mean engaging all the time at all costs. It does not mean that. But in the essence doesn't go away. So for instance, for those of you who, do you know what the Bodhisattva vow is? Yeah, for those of you who have taken the Bodhisattva vow, the only time that we break the Bodhisattva vow is when we cut somebody out of our heart. That's the breakage of the vow. So we can hold that we can work with. The rest is a calculation. Does that make sense? I don't know if it answers your question. Ask it again if it doesn't.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the computer.
Yeah.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Amy, you're a therapist. Anything more to add to that? I'm sure you're around this conversation a lot.
I think that you really covered it beautifully. I mean, there's one thing to hold something in your heart, and I think that that is where this idea of that actually cultivating compassion for someone, even if you don't know what to do, still has value. But that idea of, is this the right time? Am I the right person? You know,
Yeah.
to sit with that is definitely valuable, because you could be the right person, but it's the wrong day. or
Yeah.
or it's the, I remember when I first met Mingyur Rinpoche, and I asked him about my 3-year-old son who, you know, had all these issues, you know, and he was like, well, just don't ever try to tell him something when he's angry. You know, don't, you know, just, you know, um, so
That's great.
yeah, I'm the right person, but I got to pick the right time.
And also, part of the calculation is, do I have the capability? And is this, so you know this conversation, Amy, you know it very well. This is your bread and butter. You know, the question is, you know, when you don't have the capacity, you know, when this person is, when you have bad blood with this person and it hasn't gone well in the past, or you've been in an abusive situation with someone that this guy or girl reminds you of. And you know, so compassion goes both ways, right? The caregiver has to take care of oneself, otherwise you're toast. You don't have anything to give. And I don't have a lot of language around. Ask Court or Richie about the fine distinctions between empathy and compassion, and I have no patience with all that. I'm too stupid for it. Even though I was in the tube for one of those original studies. But what it means is, I think, we just need to be clear with ourselves. Okay, I'm up for this task today, and I'm not, or I'm not. I'm up to working with this person, or I'm not. And that's perfectly fine. There's no blame in that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Trust me, as long as that urge is there, the world will find you. The world will give you innumerable ways to express what you can when you can. I'll tell you a really quick little story. Are we supposed to end at noon, at 1:00 p.m. your time, Amy? Okay, so I gotta move along, but I'll tell you a really quick story. Talking about, yeah, so there's an old woman who works as a checkout lady at our local Safeway. I mean, I've seen her there for 20 years. She was old when I first saw her. It's completely heartbreaking. And she even has a kind of palsy. So, I mean, her sweetness and the way she says, good morning, did you find everything you needed? Her sweetness is so intense that I often choose not to go through her lane because it's so touching. Sometimes I'm not up for it. It's amazing. It rocks my world. So we can find this and we can express this in a million ways. I was recently talking to a group in the Northwest, Medford, Oregon, actually, which is a group that I mentor. And someone was asking about compassionate activity, because now in a lot of Buddhist circles, the activity always has to be some big deal. There's got to be a 501c3 behind it and a GoFundMe page, and you know, there's just no end to it, right? And the Dalai Lama is into it, His Holiness Karmapa is into it, that if you don't do something big, it's not compassion. Again, I think it's one of these I don't want to suggest that they misunderstand, but in my world, if this is in your heart, everything we do is compassionate activity. Every person we say good morning to, every person, everything, everywhere. And with that in mind, we can find bodhisattvas everywhere we turn. Honestly, I really mean this. So talking about appreciative joy, that's a practice of appreciative joy, of looking for people who have kindness. So if we have this in our heart, by definition, everything becomes infused by it. And therefore, by definition, everything becomes compassionate activity. However small, however large, we never know that person who we looked kindly upon We never know how bad a day they're having and whether or not we just saved their ass. We never know that, but it happens all day, every day. People are lifted, saved, relieved by a gesture. So this is the logic of Tanren, of taking and sending, which if we had more time, we would get into, but I don't want to. I want to go into another piece. Does that help, Jill? Does that make sense? I think yeah. Anything else from anybody before we launch into this last piece? I want to present something. We're going to have another short breakout, and then we'll end, hopefully, by 1 o'clock your time. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm thinking that sometimes generosity can be a decision not to do something, which is I think kind of what you were saying. I mean, I have people in my family that, since I'm kind of a compulsive helper, I have nearly ruined some relationships in my family by trying to help people the wrong way. And I have recently gone through a real shift in my thinking, and now I'm not trying to do that anymore. I'm really just trying to radiate my caring for them in whatever way I can. And I've completely let go of the idea of doing things for them.
Great.
And it's amazing. And I can feel the transition from this sort of clutchy tightness, this feeling of compulsion around it, to an openness and a warmer, more relaxed feeling around these relationships. And the relationships, I am also letting go of where they end up. Who knows?
That's so beautiful.
If I can undo the damage, maybe not, but at least I won't make it any worse.
That's fantastic. That's equanimity, Madeline. That's equanimity. You're okay if they listen to you or not. You're okay if you say something or don't. That's equanimity. That's fabulous. And on behalf of them, thank you. Fabulous. Also, one of the things that Mingyur Rinpoche often says, it's often hard to sort of I always worry that people get it wrong. That he said that equanimity, first you have to accept the situation. In other words, you have to accept them how they are. Otherwise, otherwise inadvertently, they're sensing, just like little monkey, you're not good enough, they're not good enough unless they follow Madeline's advice.
Right.
You know what I mean? So good, fantastic. That is a major hallmark of your path. Really wonderful. Yeah.
They probably wonder what alien has infested my body, but that's okay.
It's so great. It's also, we're not getting younger. And I think it's one of the good things actually about getting older. I can see most of you are of an age. One of the great things about getting older is that we get more tired, and we get more gentle. We get softer. We get more understanding, because we could figure if after 70 years of taking my own damn advice, I end up like this, maybe I don't need to give advice to people all the time. Maybe they can figure it out. And maybe I can be an agent to give them space and comfort and support in figuring it out. That is fantastic. It was one of the byproducts when I stopped doing clinical counseling. It was one of the occupational hazards for a counselor. I don't know about you, Amy, but is you can never really just deal with people straight. There's always a second thing going on. Oh, you're so wonderful. But if you worked out this particular syndrome, you'd be even more wonderful. And so I could never really be in the room with anybody, because I've always has this little bird in my ear tweeting, And actually, when I stopped, that all went away. And it was a tremendous relief. Yeah. So many of us have a little Buddhist bird saying, oh, you should read this, or you should practice this, or yeah. What else? Someone raised their hand. Yeah.
I'm a high school teacher. I'm feeling pretty burned out lately.
Yeah.
But I see the students, the high school students, and I have one of my own, and they're very depressed lately, you know, being in the situation of being remote, or I have them in the classroom as well. They have to sit apart from each other with their masks on, and I don't know how to help them. I feel the need to be there just to, I don't know, get their energy up, help them feel less depressed, in addition to teaching them whatever content, you know, I'm a Spanish teacher. And it's just, I don't know how to do it, you know, because sometimes they don't have the capacity and sometimes they do. And it helps a little, but they're not in a great place because of the pandemic and this whole situation. So I don't know if you have any advice, you know, within the context of what we're talking about for, as a teacher and a mom dealing with high school kids who are really struggling.
Do any of the other of you are in situation of working with high school or students these days? Anybody?
I think there's a mom of one at least, right, Amy?
Yeah, yeah.
Know. Jill, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. Jill, any advice from your own experience?
Well, my situation is I'm not in a school, so I cannot imagine, and I thank you for everything you are doing. That's it's amazing work. I've had my 3 teenagers at home with me. All 3 of them were with me since last March, and then my daughter went to college in the fall. And kind of like what Amy was saying and what we practice on Sundays is to allow whatever comes up, even the sadness, even the depression, and giving my kids language for whatever comes up, so that they can at least name it and not be afraid. I don't know if that's helpful, but we've experienced a wide spectrum in the last year, and a huge family shift as well. And I'm at the point where I'm just okay with whatever they come with, whatever they're presenting with. And I'm not looking for perfection. I want them to be happy, but happiness is kind of relative right now. It's not the what Amy was talking about with the movie. Oh, that was earlier. Amy was mentioning the movie Inside Out, and it's not this like crazy happy joy, but sometimes just being content with what is and understanding that this time is different, and that's okay. I don't know if that's useful.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah.
I think
Allison, how many students do you have?
I have classes between, I don't know, between 25 and 30 students for each class. And I have 3 classes, and a lot of them are freshmen.
Yeah.
So, and my son is a freshman in high school as well. So I feel like for them, it's especially hard. This is their first experience with high school. Most of them are at home on Zoom. A lot of them have gotten Zoom fatigue, so they keep their camera off.
Yeah.
I mean, at least like this, we have our cameras on, so it's hard to connect in that way. And then the kids in person. I'm sorry.
Do they know that you care about them?
I mean, I hope they do. I tell them I care about them.
Okay.
Maybe not enough.
You know, yeah. So you're right on the front lines, and so you know a lot already. You know more than you think you know. You know, one obviously, needless to say, to keep your batteries charged as much as you possibly can is key to everything else. Sure. So whatever that means, just you already know that. And then I would say in some ways, you know, Jill said the idea of naming it, you know, I mean, I think it's just really encouraged to say, you know, you could just say, hey, you guys, I think you're all wonderful. And I know this is really, really hard for everybody. Just name it without making a big thing of it. Just like say, okay, we're in the shit together. This will change. We're going to be here for 3 or 4 months or however long it was. Just hold your breath. I too am struggling, partly because I want you guys to be great, and then leave it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It doesn't
Stop
need to
trying to make it change. Stop trying
yeah,
to.
yeah. Just say like, okay, we're in this
Yeah.
together. And then, sometimes like, at the end of a class, what I do often at the end of when we teach is I say, okay, everybody unmute, put your camera on, and just scream at each other. You know what I mean? Like end the engagement with some sort of like energy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because so much of this work, whether emotional work, psychological work, spiritual work, et cetera, is managing energy. It's just working with energy. In the Tibetan tradition, if you've seen prayer flags, there's a horse on the prayer flag, and that's called a wind horse, lungta. And the idea is that lungta is this inner kind of like dignity, energy, upliftedness. And so much of the practice, particularly like in the Bön tradition in Tibet, is working with bringing that energy alive. So however we can do that, and you don't need a lot of content in it, just somehow to raise the energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like we could be doing SEL kind of stuff the whole time, but I guess I have to teach some Spanish as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This will change. Remember, this will change. So I'm going to offer a last piece that will be done in a half an hour. That has, I think, if there's anything that is sort of juiced my interest in all of this and has been more helpful to me around all of this stuff of connecting with others, connecting with the world, love, care, appreciation, all of this came to me just like everything comes to me. It's sort of the world has to like hit me really hard with it before I pay attention. So I have a whole bunch of stories, but I'll give you just one, for instance. So I remember years ago, I was in my dear friend's dentist, who's a good friend of mine. Many of you have heard of him, Andrew Holacek. He just happens to be smarter than the average guy. He's a Buddhist scholar, deep practitioner, and oral surgeon. Like I'm barely getting by figuring out Buddhism, and he's doing all these things. His brother is a dentist. His mother was a dentist. I mean, go figure, right? So I'm sitting in his dental chair, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden it begins to dawn on me. Like, here I am in this, and I had never really had insurance before because I lived in Nepal and everything, so here I am, I can afford to have this. First of all, I have a broken crown, which, 100 years ago, people would have died from that. They would have gotten infected. There's no medication. So I'm sitting in this lovely chair, listening to this music. Everything is like so lovely, so comfortable, right? He comes in, he gives me Novocaine so that nothing hurts. Who invented Novocaine? Who invented that? How did they make that needle that goes into you? Like whose life journey was it to discover needles? We don't know these people, right? But without them, our life is just not the same. So he comes in and is like, who goes to dental school? I mean, who goes to work to put their hands in someone's mouth all day long? I mean, just be a doctor, right? And talk about your tummy ache. Like, it's amazing that there are dental schools, that there are dental equipment. I'm sitting there and he's with this drill that makes no pain, no sound, nothing, right? And someone on the other side had gone to school to learn to vacuum the saliva out of my mouth. And now they can even make crowns while you're waiting there in the office. It's just like with these 3D printers. So I'm sitting there and I'm going like, my God, I am at the front end. I am like the hors d'oeuvre that's been produced by this spectacular amount of coming together of causes and conditions. That if any one of those causes and conditions wasn't there, I wouldn't be having this experience. If we look closely, this is biology and causality. This is not spirituality. Our life was given to us by somebody else. Our health was given to us by the nurses who took care of us when we were first born. Our socialization was given to us by the little creeps that we ran around with when we were 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old. Our education was given to us by somebody else. And it's just a spectacular organization of like educational delivery. The clean air is made possible by all these bureaucrats that dictate what kind of air we're allowed to have that we hate, right? We can, now you live in Chicago, it might be, but generally in the West, we live in places that are relatively safe because of this, that, and the other, zoning and stoplights, and there's no end. The heat in our house. I remember when I came back from Nepal, I went to get a book at the local library, and I said, well, do you have this book? And she said, no, but I can get it for you. They brought it from a different place in the state. For what? I couldn't believe it. You turn the switch and light comes on. Who made that light? Who made it possible for us to have that? Not to be weird, but when you flush the toilet, where does it go? What would our life be like were it not for the army of professionals who made sure that we don't have to deal with that? Honestly, I don't know where it goes. I have no idea. But there's like underground, particularly in Chicago, right? There's this web of like stuff that things are coming to you and going to you, and they can't touch each other because that would screw everything up. In the end, there is no me except for that. Make sense? I don't exist were it not for other. This is not philosophy. This is not theology. This is causality. You know, when I was young, as were some of you, if you can remember the Simon and Garfunkel tune, which was the kind of rallying cry for the time, you know, I am a rock, I am an island, right? We had that belief. There was that belief that we were sort of individual agents, and we had complete control over our lives, and we could make of it what we weren't, what we wanted. That's not true. There's not one piece of that that's true. So the idea, even the question about whether we should be generous and appreciative, much less when we get into the far end of this conversation, in other words, whether anything truly exists, if it only exists in a web of coming together of causes and conditions, right? I mean, by the way, you want to know emptiness? You want to understand emptiness? Just understand this point. And that's all you need to know, literally, quite literally. In the philosophic tradition, this is called the argument of great interdependence. If something that exists dependent on something else, it doesn't exist itself. We don't exist other than by what has been offered to us by others. So in terms of generosity, much less compassion and loving kindness and all of that, and joy and everything, anytime we imagine ourselves as anything other than the offering of someone else, we're not only going to suffer, but we're just wrong. We're spectacularly wrong. It's just we're factually wrong. This is not some Hallmark card thing that we should remember. We're just talking about facts. So as the wonderful, brilliant, young, oh, she's not young anymore, I guess, Khandro Rinpoche, Tibetan teacher, many of you know, Khandro Rinpoche, she said, and this tidbit, if what I'm about to say, it's just 4 or 5 words, can go into your ear and bother you for the rest of your life, it will change your life. She said, we are a gathering of the kindnesses of others. We are a gathering of the kindnesses of others. Any other understanding about who we are or how other is just wrong. It's not that it's not inspiring or proper or compassionate. It's just not true. Even people who drive us crazy. Without them, we wouldn't be on this path. Does that make sense? Without people that just pushed us just about to the limit, but not over it. They inspired us to figure out what's going on here. The Dalai Lama said, a good enemy is hard to find along the path. Enemy, we no longer use that word. In polite company, we don't use word enemy anymore. We use difficult person. But it's the same logic. There's a beautiful story in our tradition. This goes back to the great Atisha. And Atisha would, when he would travel with his entourage, and then they always had a tea boy who made the tea for everybody. Making tea is a big production. It's not a small thing. You don't turn on the stove. You got to get the, and they're traveling, so they have to build the hearth and get the wood and the flint and all that stuff and put the tea, and it's like a big production. And also tea is important, right? Particularly in Tibetan culture, tea is everything. Indian and Tibetan culture. So they had this Bengali tea boy, this kid from Bengal. And apparently this Bengali tea boy was extremely irritable and contentious, and he always made trouble. And so at one point, the students in the entourage around the great Atisha said, we got to get rid of this kid. He's just drives everybody crazy, and he's bad for the Lama. And so they sent him off. And Atisha woke up, and someone else was making tea, and he says, where's my Bengali tea boy? And he says, oh, Lama, we expelled him from the community. And he said, what? He said, who do I have to practice patience with were it not for that Bengali tea boy? Go get that boy. So they went and got him. And they said, oh, the guru wants you to come back, and would you please come back? And the Bengali tea boy says, you got to give me gold before I'll come back. But that's the way it is with people. And that's the way it is with us, right? We are a gathering of the kindnesses of others. So the very idea, what I would have done if we had time, we would have been broken up into groups, but just for a few minutes, if we really got this, like got it in our system, like really got it in our system, what would change? Anybody? What would change for us? Like really got it. Like we woke up in the morning and it's like, okay, I totally see this. What would change? Yeah.
The feeling I get when I think of it, I often have this idea of things I need to accomplish, make something out of myself. And it's such a relief of that. It's just lovely. I mean, it's still expansive. It's not that I would be inert or something, but it's it's almost funny in a way. It's like, oh,
yeah.
Because I think a lot of my effort is to become a part of something, and this already gives me that.
Yeah, we're chasing after something that if we just relax into it, it's like it's everywhere.
I already am a part of something.
You already are. You're nothing other than
Exactly.
a part of. Really, no, literally, you are literally nothing other than a part of something else. We don't even have an original thought. All of our thoughts are influenced or conditioned by someone else. We can't even have a daydream without somebody else. Amazing. What else? Anybody? Yeah.
I've been thinking lately about the other side of things, and it came up when I was thinking about forgiving someone. And it made me think that who am I to forgive someone? It's like there isn't forgiveness necessary because there's just this interaction of a cause and a condition on both sides. And for some reason, when I don't think of myself and other and me very rigidly, it's much easier to just say, okay, that happened, and put it down, rather than to think of this kind of holier than thou feeling of I'm good and you did something bad, but I forgive you, kind of thing. And it gets very, well, amazing and open, and it's like there's no place, like you were saying, to draw the line. This is me and I'm important, and this is you and you are not. And it goes to me and my family and my community and my feelings and my Buddhists, and then it gets into my pets, and those animals are okay and those aren't. And then and I start thinking, I had such a problem in my garden last year because of whiteflies, and they were really destroying the food that we eat. And it's like, well, trying to figure out where to find the balance, because I didn't hate them, and if I don't grow my garden and try to balance it in some way, then it's just paying somebody else to kill the whiteflies, and they might not do it.
So,
It's
yeah,
like, it's like you were saying, that it's not just me and other people. I just am beginning to feel this, the snowflakes that are falling outside my window right now, and the microbes beneath the earth that they need to survive so that I can survive. And it's just,
yeah. So what happens is when you begin to understand things like this, rather than resenting other people for being other people or other circumstances for being other circumstances, we have no idea. The person who blew up at us the other day, we don't know the world they lived in. I'll send out, Amy or Madeline, I'd like to send out 2 clips. One was the Father Boyle and the other is something about this. We have no idea. We always take it personally, but we have no idea. If we can get out of the way, if we can stop being a plug in the system, then we can begin to work with the system. Work with the garden systems, and without the resentment. It's the resentment somehow that gets in the way of everything. That's what needs to be forgiven. The rest is just honoring the interdependence. Then we become intelligent and effective. Yeah, really good. Yeah, Amy.
Well, what I was going to say is, like, if we could really get this, I noticed like a kind of like a letting go of like the seizing that's normally in my stomach, this kind of tightness, and then this idea of almost like my skin and my body as like a membrane. It could almost just be pricked and fall open, and like to Yvonne's point about forgiveness, that's why I so love Rinpoche saying, and it was almost like, where did it come from? We don't normally talk about forgiveness, but he's like, and in the allowing is the forgiveness. Because forgiveness is for us. That took me so long to understand. Like, why would I forgive someone who doesn't even want to be forgiven? It's not for them. It's for me. It's about how I'm relating. It's like, again, in that allowing, in that space and that ease, I like really appreciate that. I mean, the people that come to mind, like, who should I forgive? Well, that person in this gathering of kindnesses has been very kind to me many, many times, except for the time they weren't. And so that idea of like, how am I'm the one, like your Dalai Lama, it's like taking the poison and expecting the other person to die, so how am I relating to this?
Yeah, really good. Really good. Anybody else? How would this affect your life if we really got this, that we were the gathering of the kindnesses of others? Yeah, Jill.
I brought this up in our group a little while ago. My aspiration is to be able to experience this spontaneously. Sometimes I'm a couple steps behind. So I feel like if I can be skillful in the moment, whether that's, I don't know if the word's not forgiving, but just allowing people to be people, and I could move more easily through the world, especially now. I just would like to give a very brief example. A few days ago, I had to go to the DMV. My license expired, and I made the appointment, and I didn't make the appointment. I made the decision to go all the way to the suburbs because I had felt like the experience in the city would be a bit overwhelming, a little crowded. But I still didn't know what to expect. It's been many, many years since I've been to the DMV for myself. And so I went with no feeling that it was going to be good or bad, just I'm committed to going. And the first thing that happened was I got yelled at because I did the wrong thing. And I was rattled, like, oh my gosh, I'm getting yelled at. And then I just, a couple minutes, not minutes, it was like within a minute, I let go of it and saw this person as having a really hard job. She's managing a line outside in the cold. And it all fell away. But I had a moment of being rattled and feeling, shame or stupid or whatever. But then I looked at her as not as an other, but as part of this whole ecosystem. And I found myself smiling under my mask to everyone I had to deal with inside the building, and saying to a couple of people, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being patient with me. They may not have been patient with me. Maybe inside they were seething or frowning under their mask, but I just felt this connection to everyone who was in this building. And it ended up being a truly wonderful experience because of that.
So beautiful. So beautiful. It's
So
all a tilt of the
in
head.
the moment, I would be happy.
Yeah. It's all a tilt of the head, isn't it?
Yeah.
We could go this way, the habitual way, or try again, look again, enter again, and see a whole different world. I'm going to send you a clip around just this. I'm going to send you 3 clips, and that sort of have really helped me a lot with these kinds of things. But it's just a tilt of the head. It's so beautiful. Again, you're not making something up. You're seeing reality. That's what's important here. We're not adding some kind of like spiritual jam on top of it. We're taking that away and just seeing clearly what's going on. It's so beautiful, actually. Anybody else? Yeah, Derek.
Yeah, I think if I could hold that realization to its truest extent, I think that would just really change the quality of the interactions with everybody. That I would encounter. That I would be able to approach all my interactions with just a deep love and connection for everybody. And I say that because I feel like sometimes I do get glimpses of that through this practice. I'm very thankful for that. But other times I lose sight of that. And I think so. Yeah, I think that would continue to grow.
Right. That's great. Really great, Derek. By the way, Tom, earlier today, you mentioned something about study and all the stuff to study. This is why we study, so that we can see what isn't coming naturally to us, because we keep getting caught up in our own habitual way of seeing things. So this is why we study, to actually see the world more accurately, so that we can relieve the habitual responses to our inaccurate way of seeing the world before. That's why we study. Yeah. And this doesn't take a lot of study, right? This is not brain surgery, right? This is just acknowledging pretty much the obvious. Now, In Buddhist geeky circles, they go spend years talking about Madhyamaka and interdependence and all this yada yada. But we just did it. This is it. There's not much more that you need to know, actually. This is the jewel within it. For those of you who like to study, this is called the great interdependence. If something depends on something else, then it doesn't exist in and of itself. And so our response to that is understanding that our life is dependent on everything else. The truth is beautiful. The truth is really beautiful, actually. When we see things truly, not only are we liberated, because we're liberated from our misunderstanding, but we enter a world that's beautiful, like this. Seeing the truth, one sec, Madeline. We're going to run 5 minutes late, I'm sorry. Seeing the truth is instantly liberating. Giving a quick example. In other words, if we tilt our head and are willing to see these things, of course we spend time on the cushion. But time on the cushion really is time on the cushion is allowing us to slow down enough and open it up enough so that we can see the truth. Because we're going so fast that we don't see the truth. The truth doesn't change because we see it or not. To give you an example of how powerful it is to see things. Let's say that we were walking home at night. Every night, it's in the evening and it's pretty dark. And we hear this growling dog not far from us down an alley. And every night we go by and the dog is, we go, it's like, who is that dog? And one of those people, bring that dog in, and that damn dog shouldn't be out there. There should be a law. I should go call animal control, yada, yada, right? We're going, we really get upset, right? So one night we go by, and as the moment we go by the alley, a car comes by, and in the headlights, immediately we see that the dog has become ensnared in some wire in the corner, and he's hurt. In an instant, our experience of that dog completely changes. We see the dog is in trouble. We see the dog is hurt. He's not growling, he's crying. And our impulse is to move towards the dog rather than away. This is what it means. This is called insight. It's to see the truth. And when we see things as they really are, like this interdependence, our world changes. We don't need to meditate on this forever if we keep this in mind. Madeline, did you have something?
I just wanted to say that taking this in, it seems to me the only real response is gratitude.
Touchdown. This is it. You got it. You made the last 4 hours meaningful for me, honestly. Like, imagine that. If gratitude was the only gum we chewed for the rest of our life, it would completely change our life. So that's just to say, again, we don't need to know everything. If we know one or two things, the rest come along. Gratitude, chew on that for the rest of our lives. When I was a director of a monastery of Gampo Abbey in Nova Scotia, on Saturdays was a free day. There was no practice and no study, and everybody was relieved so everyone was happy. So in the dining room one Saturday, I overheard someone saying, they were saying, I don't know why I'm saying this, but this is another one of these earworm things. They were saying, oh, you know something? I heard someone say, do you know how to get everything you want in life? And of course I like, and they said, pray for what you have. Gratitude, right? We can do that. We can do this. This is not rocket science. It's not advanced philosophy. It's not cave in the mountains. It's a tilt of the head, interdependence, gratitude, sympathetic joy, appreciative joy. These are this is a tilt of the head. But we have to, but the ingredient for whether that happens or not, whether or not that happens, I think is two things. One is, this is why meditation is so helpful, because it allows us to slow down our patterning enough to interrupt it and to introduce a new way of being, a new way of seeing, if that makes sense. That's one. And the other is a willingness to learn, to take on something new, to be willing to try something. In other words, a lack of arrogance we need as people on the path. A lot of us on the path, we start off being arrogant, and we just get more and more arrogant because we think we know so many things. But if we go the other way and are willing to be students of our life, then these lessons come easy because they're all around us. The world is yelling this at us. All we have to do is look and see, like looking at the dog or the woman at the checkout stand, if that makes sense. The world is just screaming at us. In fact, someday, maybe we'll have another gathering and we can talk about this idea of what we call the guru of the phenomenal world. In other words, how the world is our teacher. And we can either orient ourselves so that we're learning constantly, or orienting ourselves so that we're blocking the message. So we need to be willing to orient ourselves so that we hear the world. The world can touch us. Yeah. Okay, everybody. So before we say our closing aspiration, and then what I want is everybody to unmute and say goodbye. So before then, I just want to say again, I appreciate everybody's interest in all of this stuff. I appreciate your willingness to take your Saturday morning to sacrifice a Saturday morning to consider it. I'm just a guy along the way. So this is not Mingyur Rinpoche or something. So I really appreciate you're willing to listen to a peer. This is really, really helpful because we have a lot of peers. We don't have so many superstars, but we have a lot of peers, and it's really beautiful. I really, really, really appreciate the fact that all the energy that you've put in, Amy, Madeline, and all the rest of you who have put into keeping this Tergar group alive. I don't want to bore you out. I won't go on about the power of community, but one beautiful thing about community is that one of the dozens of beautiful things about community is that it is a place that someone who desperately needs to be seen and heard and known can come to. Were it not for you or communities like you and us, those people would have nowhere to go. We were that person at one point. We are that person, but there was a time when that need was acute. And for others, for some people, it's life and death. So the willingness to hold space, to do something, to have a profound conversation. This is what Sangha means, gathering together and delighting in a virtuous conversation. That's what Sangha means. The willingness to do that has nothing to do with Buddhism. It's just to do with good people coming together and exploring uplifted things. This gives a place for someone else to come and be heard and known and discover that they're not unacceptable. This is so important. I really, really, really beg you to thank yourself, to congratulate yourself, and to encourage yourself when you think, oh, I don't want to do that. Same old thing, we've done that. And encourage yourself and say, no, I'm going to go hold that place because we don't know who's going to come through the door. Because you were that person. I was that person. Sangha saved my life. And it saves all of our lives in some level of abstraction. So let's, would one of us, so talking about dedication. So at this moment, as you know, we just take a millisecond to think, okay, if something good came out of this, I hope we can share this good, maybe something good that changed my attitude about the world that then can affect the world. So this is a quality of dedication. So we can just do that for a moment. And Michelle, Madeline, or Amy, do you want to lead us in the dedication?
Sure.
And then let's come back and say goodbye.
So let's just take a moment to assume our posture, settle in for a sec, renew our motivation, and then share together. By the power of this compassionate practice, may suffering be transformed into peace. May the hearts
And the hearts of all be.
and their wisdom radiate from within.
Great. Let's unmute and say goodbye.
Well, right before we do that,
Yeah.
we want to, thank you so much, Tim, for being here. This has been such a delight, and I am going to go ahead and already just take you up on that offer to come back and have another day or session on the Guru of the Phenomenal World.
Yeah.
I'm glad this came off as well as it did. We've never done something like this before, and so I'm sure that next time it will be even better handled on our end than this one was. So thank you so much again for taking the time to be with us, and it was just fun. So everybody,
you're very welcome. Yeah. Okay. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you.